Welcome back, everybody. I am Scott Simpson. Nimble W numbers on the X now, they call it. The kids are calling it. Twitter for older friends who've been on it for a long time. I'm really excited. Wide receiver 2 theory is in its 5th year. Its 5th birthday is coming up around August 10th or so. It's going to release a little earlier than that. But to kind of warm the waters, to get us thinking about it, to get us in that mode, I have brought on the one and only Eric Moody from ESPN, extraordinaire, fantasy analyst, to kind of help us bridge the gap, get into the mindset of wide receivers. What are we thinking about? How are we surveying the landscape? So we're going to go through a litany of different wide receiver agility drills that are designed just for Eric and his skill set. He's not Frank Thomas. He's much better looking than Frank Thomas, younger, handsomer, stronger. We've established that in the pre-talk. But without further ado, Eric, welcome, brother. So excited to talk football with you again this year.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, Scott. Yeah, appreciate the invite. When you reached out, I was like, absolutely, we'll make time to do this. But you hit on a lot of things. For one, training camps are underway. We're edging ever so closely to the fantasy football season, and I'm excited. It's a lot to talk about, and we may even talk about Frank Thomas too. So let's get
Maybe.
into it.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I want people to kind of understand too about all the people who I talk to is kind of a little bit about their background and kind of where they come from and where they kind of got that fantasy itch. Because right now you're working for kind of the network that we've all kind of grew up in. I still have a league that's in ESPN. It's the league of record. It is the one that is worth thousands of dollars at this point, bragging rights. And my podcast partner has won it 4 times. So I've only won it once. So you really, honestly, this is a cry for help. I need some help, Eric, to help me win my own league this year in ESPN. But because you're there, I know you didn't start there. You weren't born there like Field Yates. So I'd love to kind of give people the background of, where your journey came before that, and then now kind of where you're at and what you're working on.
That's funny about Field Yates being born there. He has been there for a while, hasn't he?
Oh, he's like
So
12 working there.
you have to wait till he's 16, right? But anyway, I digress. So
Yeah.
So I guess for me, let me figure out where to start. Like I began creating content back in 2015 as a quote unquote side hustle, just because I love football, the NFL, and I love fantasy football. So I was working at a call center, as a financial advisor in the call center. People call in, I learn about their situation and give financial advice. And what ended up happening, I got on Twitter, as the old people would say, Twitter and not X. I still call it Twitter. Sometimes I call it X. It just depends. So I kind of started off like tweeting about fantasy football opinions and really just trying to interact with others in the industry. Evan Silva. I'm trying to think everyone who's around back then. Matthew Berry, of course, and others. So what ended up happening that led to writing opportunities with Fantasy Pros, RotoViz, Gridiron Experts, 4for4s, pretty much any site out there that's been around since 2015. I feel like I've written for them, so everyone can Google that. But what ended up happening is, I appeared on a lot of podcasts, live streams like this that led to like an analyst role with the Athletic, Pro Football Network, and ultimately ESPN. And so I guess the big takeaway for someone that's writing or creating content now who wants to make that leap is that you just have to be proactive and consistent and just try to build on what you're doing year in and year out. I think that consistency, if you're around, people keep, seeing you around. You and I both know, Scott, it's been a lot of faces that have kind of come and go in the industry, over this last like decade or so. But if you're consistent and keep trying to improve, I'm like, that's where things can really open up. And to put a bow on that with, I guess the proliferation of sports betting, that's really opened up another, I would say that's opened up additional job opportunities as well. So,
Ooh, I love that too, and it's always great listening to the now the NFL commentators commenting on the lines and just
yes.
acknowledging them as real things that are, oh man, that touchdown, return for a touchdown interception tilted the line. People are nuts right now. So that's really exciting to hear too. And I think you're one of the reasons why I purchased at the time an athletic subscription. No lie. Not anymore. No. I mean, I'm not made of money anymore. But I followed you from there to ESPN, and it's so encouraging to see someone who really they take their love of something like fantasy football, and then they work hard, they leverage it, and then like you said, they kind of just keep going, boom, 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 boom. And you're right where you should be. And I'm excited to kind of break down your knowledge and really sharpen my.
May have lost you there for a second.
Okay. I'm sorry. I just started spinning for a second. So can you hear
No,
me now?
you're good. Yeah, I was just kind
Yeah.
of standing by. I was like, he's going to come back
It,
eventually. So go ahead,
it,
my man.
everything just went dark for a second there and started spinning. Not in my eyes, but on the screen. Um, but there's so many different wide receiver twos that have an opportunity this year that we're going to kind of look at that. Here's a question I have for you: is what's your kind of project this year that you're looking at, or kind of where's your focus that you're kind of excited about when you get into your analyst role this year for ESPN?
Yeah, it's a couple of things. I would say, I'll try to be as brief as possible. One thing that I was really excited about this summer is that, we had kind of our core group, our staff group, so about 10 of us. So we're just doing a series of mock drafts. So the goal is to do at least 40s the floor, but we may do a little bit more, and kind of look at trends. Who are some players that I'm drafting in a high percentage of leagues? Mike Clay, Field Yates, Liz Loza, and then kind of create content like around that. And it's the same group, and we try to do at least 2 or more a day, and just to see kind of what comes out of that. So that's really exciting. Other content that I've done in previous years that I'll be doing this year, like the positional tiers,
Love that.
late round draft targets, targets, players that you should target like in the double digit rounds, the my guys or the guys I'm planting my flag on. But I also
Those are
have something
teasers. Those are all teasers. We're talking about them at the end. Teasers.
Oh yeah, and
Yeah.
so something else I'm excited about should be published. I think today, I believe, is like the top 10 running back insurance rankings. That'll be published soon. Basically, highlighting running backs you should target, kind of in the, I would say, the middle rounds to the late rounds, who could become league winners if the starter or their committee mate misses time. But
Mm.
also do the waiver wire column again for this year, and some other surprises on the horizon. But I think that kind of lays the groundwork. What do you think, Scott?
I think if you don't follow Eric, you're probably not going to win your fantasy league because, like, any one of those things are all like they're all essential parts of the game. It's like the pre-drafting, the
Mhm,
rankings, how you go through each week. I love all of those. I do have a follow-up
mhm.
question for you guys
Oh,
about
sure.
your drafting when you're doing your mocking. Are you
Mhm.
in the same spot each time? Do you kind of rotate spots? Kind of what is the kind of vantage point from the multiple mocks? Are you around the board or kind of just locked into one spot?
No, definitely around the board. So trying to
Okay.
get a feel for, how do we build teams, from the one spot or somewhere in the middle or at the end, like near the turn. I would say I'm not the biggest fan of building teams at the turn like for this
Same.
year. In previous years, like I've loved it, but I actually kind of prefer like the middle rounds for this year.
Yeah,
So
same. I just did my home league, ESPN home league
mhm.
randomizer process, which is me taking 12 balls, wiffle ball, ping pong balls, but hitting them up
Oh
with
yeah.
a ball bat. Whichever one goes the furthest is the first pick, the last pick. I randomize. I don't know the numbers. My friends do that offline. They say whose name is with which number. I got the third pick. So, I mean, I'm
Not bad.
excited. My podcast
Mhm,
partner got the seventh. I like that mid range where you can kind of get that value coming back in the second. So third's good,
mhm,
but I think you're right. The middle first always has an advantage. But besides that, when you're looking for kind of outside the box thinking, I don't like the 12, 11, 12. I know I'm not comfortable having
mhm.
tiers of wide receivers and running backs and just leveled before I can even taste them. So no, I'm with you. All right, let's jump into some of the wide receiver two theory content, and I'll kind of break it down for people who don't understand what it is. Maybe you're hearing it. I did coin the phrase, by the way. So if you hear anybody else saying wide receiver two theory or even talking about wide receivers twos ever to me, no, actually, I reached out to JJ Zacharyson like 5 years ago and asked him, had anybody looked at the value that wide receiver twos have and how people value them compared to wide receiver ones? And are they undervalued? Are they overvalued? And what did that kind of compilation look out? And the data over time is between 35 and 40% of wide receiver ones who are drafted as wide receiver ones do not finish as the wide receiver ones on their team. So you have 40% of the people that you're like, this is my guy, not even the guy most years. So with that being said, I kind of dove in, figured out that there are trends and things that do lead to opportunities for the wide receiver two to either eclipse the wide receiver one or to really the disparity between them in ADP to close that gap and return value either way for your investment. So that's the kind of the big picture. Here's what we're going to do first. We're going to get into some teammate matchups. And I did give Eric the answers beforehand, or not the answer, the test question. So he has that. There's no right answer. We're going to hear what he has to say, and then we'll judge accordingly, right? But we're going to look at some teammates. We'll look at San Francisco's Brandon Ayuk, who's right now wide receiver 14 versus Debo, who's wide receiver 15, and then we'll look at some other we'll go down the ranks of highest to lowest ADP. So with that being said, Ayuk is in a situation where he's just requested a trade. The data could switch. Debo could go up at any time. They're neck and neck. Who are you targeting out of these two teammates when you go to draft? If in your mock drafts or in your practice drafts, and what's the discussion around that been with you guys?
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that. It's just a lot of uncertainty with Brandon Ayuk right now. Will he be with the 49ers or will he be with the Steelers or the Commanders? But for me personally, I find myself gravitating more to Debo Samuel. So let me explain. I would say both are relatively undervalued in the mock drafts that we're doing right now. Debo, in particular, I've been very surprised where I've been able to draft him. We all know the 49ers. I'm like, this is a team that's loaded with playmakers. You got Christian McCaffrey, and his arrival did negatively impact Samuel, especially in the area of rushing attempts. But if you look at Samuel last year, I mean, he was still productive for fantasy managers, ended up averaging around 16.2 fantasy points per game, did lead the 49ers with 17 red zone looks. Now, while durability is a concern, I just look at Samuel and the circumstances having a much higher ceiling, especially if Ayuk is traded. Either way, I do like Brandon Ayuk and Debo Samuel as high-end wide receiver twos, but I do kind of prefer, I would say, Samuel just due to his versatility. So I'm leaning more towards Samuel here.
Yeah, and I maybe it's just the recency bias of watching the wide receiver or the receiver on Netflix.
Oh, yeah.
And kind of just seeing Debo. He did get hurt last year. He had a broken rib, and that does come from being. I mean, receiver getting banged out and hit all the time. So it's one of the most vulnerable positions on the field. I understand why they're divas a little bit, but that guy's no diva, man. That's a steamroller, and you just see the role he plays in the offense is so essential and so vital that he's going to get his touches. He's going to get his targets. And I mean, 18% target share last year. I'm comfortable with that. 67%. That's where I want his reception percentage to jump up a little bit. I think it can. So I'm with you on Debo. I'm also doing that as well. So we're neck and neck so far. No discrepancies. I like that. All right, let's transition to a little lower down, a little less known at the quarterback position in Tennessee. We've got Will Levis. He's got the reins. He's got a cannon. Apparently, a couple places he's got a cannon. But he's got Calvin Ridley, wide receiver 33, and then DeAndre Hopkins, the old trusted, never drop a football. Only been running on the left side of the field in Arizona for the last several years. Hopkins at wide receiver 39. Calvin Ridley got paid like $74 million, like $50 million guaranteed. Well, is that just a target funnel that they're going to have to feed, or they're going to get called out for it, or what's this look like?
Yeah, I was just really surprised that they did pay Calvin Ridley that amount of money, but I'm also surprised that he did sign with the Titans. So here's what I'm noticing is that Calvin Ridley is being drafted in many of the leagues and mocks that I've been in before DeAndre Hopkins, which really positions DeAndre Hopkins as a value. And here's the thing with Calvin Ridley. I think he's obviously going to open things up more downfield for the Titans and Will Levis, in 2024, which I believe benefits Hopkins. And one thing about Ridley, I'm like, he did have 7 games last year with 83 or more receiving yards. He did have 9 with 40 yards or less. Only caught 56% of his targets. So that's obviously has to improve, just considering the volume that he had last year. But what I like about Hopkins is that I believe he's a great value. He posted his highest yards per reception since 2017.
Yep.
I think he's still positioned to surpass 100 targets playing alongside Ridley. I do believe his days of having 10 or more receptions in a game, or I would say, are behind him. But even though Hopkins is entering his age 32 season, the guy's a technician on the field.
Yep.
He can win without having to rely solely on his physicality. I don't know if I can say that for Calvin Ridley. So to bring all that together, I do like Hopkins as a reliable, I would say, wide receiver 3 or flex option, but don't be shocked if the guy finishes as a kind of low end or mid range wide receiver 2. So
yeah, and if you're able to get him maybe 2 rounds later than Calvin Ridley, that wide receiver value, because he's not the wide receiver 1, he's just the wide receiver 2 on the team. He got 137 targets last year, and so Will Levis does want to chuck it. He does want to go deep, but if Calvin Ridley is taking the top off, who's going to take the middle off? It's going to be DeAndre Hopkins. He's going to kind of have that range where the safeties are not going to be there. He can get behind the linebackers. We're not worried about that, and I really do like it. And his ADOT 15.1, I mean, Yeah. So his air yards, by the way, were almost 2,000 last year. Homeboy had 1,932 air. Holy crap! So they're targeting him too deep as well. So it's not, not just Calvin Ridley is going to get some bombs. So yeah, I really like DeAndre Hopkins. So far we're 2 for 2 on the wide receiver twos in the pairings that are being drafted at a kind of a value. All right, well, drop down a little further. This is now a wide receiver 2 battle. We already know in Carolina who the wide receiver 1's going to be. It's not going to be Adam Thielen, and it's not going to be Xavier Legette. But between those two guys, we had a big, huge performance last year from Adam Thielen. He shot up. I mean, he was way underdrafted, obviously. But now he's wide receiver 65. Legette is wide receiver 67. The pick 'em, right? In this offense, Bryce Young is improving. You're going to have a better year this year. You got a nice running back coming into wide receiver. So you've got the pieces. Thielen's still going to get his. How do you think this shapes up, and who you're targeting if you're in those later rounds and you're trying to get some value?
Yeah, I'm going with Adam Thielen here. Like you kind of touched on something for where he surprisingly bounced back in 2023. Right. I know he surpassed 100 receptions and 1,000 receiving yards. Like he was really Bryce Young's only reliable target, which kind of led us to the Panthers picking up Deontay Johnson. And one thing about Thielen as well, he ranked 3rd among wide receivers in routes, and so. You've got Bryce Young, who we anticipate will take a step forward in year 2, having his first full NFL offseason. He's got a great offensive mind in Dave Canales that's with Carolina now, so you got to factor that in. And I would say even though the Panthers did add Deontay Johnson, I still see Thielen being actively involved. So I at least have him personally projected to finish with the 2nd most targets on the Panthers, behind Johnson in this retooled Panthers offense. So I'm very cautiously optimistic about Bryce Young in year 2, but just given where Thielen's going, I would rather hang my hat on the veteran as opposed to the rookie, but that's just me.
Yeah, I'm with you on that too. And I do think Bryce Young improves this year, maybe get you 20 touchdowns. And why wouldn't Adam Thielen, get at least a 20% or 18% target share, even if you give Deontay Johnson 22, 23%. His catch percentage is not as good as Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen's your first down guy. If you're 3rd and 8, 3rd and 6, he's going to go in the middle of the field. You're going to be able to hit him. He's going to catch the ball. So, I do think Adam Thielen is just going to be there. Whereas Legette will have those plays that are just like, holy crap, that's an incredible play, and it'll be a highlight play, maybe win you your week if you're DFSing. But we'll see too how injury plays a part too, because all of this is just 100% of injuries happen 100% of the time, all the time, and we know that in the NFL. So this all could change, but I do like the Thielen lean. All right, last one, and some would even say this might be a waste of a pick if you're not really into the deep dive wide receivers, but we are, and we love them. Demario Douglas last year in the slot. Ridiculous, right? He just kind of was the only option they had besides Hunter Henry for anything in New England. And yes, it was Mac Jones and a compilation of crap, but it was still what got the job done, and it helped fantasy managers to find that diamond in the late rough. He's wide receiver 69. He's the first wide receiver off the board for New England right now. And then Jalen Polk is wide receiver 72. They drafted him this year, 2nd round, 3rd round, one of those rounds that are important for wide receivers. And so how do you see this happening? You've got is Drake May, is that who's there too? As the QB. This is a whole brand new operation. I know we don't trust rookies. Do we trust rookie to rookie? Or we're going back to kind of that slot receiver? Hopefully he's the security blanket. We're looking for that value.
Yeah, I'm going with Douglas here. Douglas is someone that I am drafting late, like in a high percentage of the mock draft that we're doing at ESPN. And I want to say in many cases, I'm getting him as my wide receiver 5 or wide receiver 6. And I'm very comfortable with that. Now, you kind of alluded to this, like the passing game for New England obviously struggled last season, which kind of helps explain, in my opinion, like Douglas's failure to score, touchdowns last year.
Right.
But you're going to have Drake May. I think that could help change that in 2024. And I do have May projected to start more games than Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah.
And you look at Douglas, you mentioned about his work from the slot, had about 68% of his targets coming from there last season. And if you look from week 7 on, he did have a 21% target share and a 25% air yard share, which are 2 things that are very encouraging. Yep. And so I like Douglas. If you wanted me to pick someone to lead the Patriots in targets, Douglas is my guy. I know you've got Kendrick Bourne. We haven't really spoken about him. You mentioned about the rookie Polk, are really going to be his top competition. But I just don't think it's a reason why you shouldn't leave your draft without Douglas as a late round flyer, especially as your wide receiver 5 or 6, just depending on the depth of your league, right?
Yeah. Yeah, if you can get somebody who can get you double-digit points, and
Hmm.
consistently get you 10, 11 points every week,
Yeah.
and, and then maybe there is a target funnel that situation happens where Polk,
Hmm.
he's a rookie. He's amazingly
Yeah.
athletic, incredible, but, maybe there's just not a connection right away, or maybe it's a big play connection happens, Rashid Shaheed once a week, not or once a month, not every couple weeks.
Yeah.
Um, but, yeah, no, I like that too. And so, all right, so most of them you were choosing the wide receiver 2 in the relationship, or the one that's getting the value. But there, Damari Douglas, we went earlier
Mhm.
than Polk, which I like as well. All right, thank you
Yeah.
for that. That was perfect. All right, now we're going to do some tier based drafting. You're in these drafts, your mocks
Mhm.
or your real home league draft, and there's tiers of wide receivers that you can target, right? And so,
Mhm.
what we're looking at now is kind of in these tiers, and I've broken it down to a couple different tiers, and I'll give you the tier and just kind of maybe argue who you're going to draft in this tier if you're up against the turn or the whatever it is, the pick is coming your way and you're like, I've got these guys available, and then who are you kind of fading in that group maybe as well. So here's
Mhm.
tier one. We've got someone named Jalen Waddle, never heard of him, wide receiver 17 being drafted, kids like him. Cooper Cup, my little Cooper Cup, I don't know, he's somebody, wide receiver 20. Stefan Diggs, Stefania Diggs. No, not the right thing. I love Stefania Bell, by the way. Stefan Diggs, wide receiver 22, and then Devonta Smith. I've heard of him. Wide receiver 23. So you got a little bit of a range there. Who are you leaning on, or who do you see yourself drafting the most when they're available to you in that range?
Yeah, it's going to be Cooper Cup for me. I'm like, there's another player, but again, a high percentage of the ESPN mock drafts that we're doing, I'm trying to land Cup. Now, let me explain here. So everyone's in love with Puka Nakua, whose ADP is ridiculously high. That's just my opinion.
Kind of high.
So you look at Cup. I'm like, he missed the first 4 weeks of 2023, had the hamstring issue going on, has missed 13 games over the last 2 seasons. However, you look at Cup, he has averaged 9 targets, 17 fantasy points per game over that time frame. Looking at last season, you got Cup. He was held under 40 yards in 6 to 12 games. Did score those 4 touchdowns from weeks 13 through 17, which really salvaged his fantasy value.
Oh, for sure.
And obviously Puka Nakua's emergence, negatively affected Cup's like target volume. But I think Cup will be even more motivated this offseason to make sure he's in the best shape as possible, especially when you have a breakout performance like Nakua. I think he wants to remind people that, hey, I'm Cooper Cup. I'm still very productive. We can coexist together. So he should be healthier this year. I'll leave you with this. Now, what's really fascinating was that 87% of Cup's targets last season came when he was wide open or open. 6th highest rate of any wide receiver in the league. We all know about the rapport between Cup and Matthew Stafford, breakfast bros, whatever you want to call it. It's undeniable. So I really like Cup to bounce back nicely in 2024. Now, I'm kind of curious. Did you want me to comment too on the guy that I'm fading, or just some quick thoughts on these other guys? How do you want to play it, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to keep you here forever, but if
Oh, you're
you're,
fine. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, for me, maybe
Mhm.
Stefan Diggs is somebody who
Mhm.
I'm unsure of how that's going to work with Tank Dell, Nico
Yeah.
Collins, and Stefan Diggs. So I think CJ
Mhm.
Stroud is going to pass the ball 60% of the time. I get that, or whatever it is, 59%. He's one of the highest
Yeah.
pass rates in the league, but I'm still. I think Stefan Diggs, and I don't think he lost a step, and that's why Buffalo changed their offensive strategy. I don't think that, but
Mhm.
I just find it hard for me to just pay up for him at that price and think that
Mhm.
he's going to consistently deliver the target share that he needs to kind
Yeah.
of get where he needs to go, because he's not somebody who's going to beat you downfield and run past you every single time and you're like, we can't catch him,
Mhm.
he's Chris Johnson, he can be tackled, and if he doesn't get that touchdown on that deep ball, well, that's a problem. Whereas Nico Collins, maybe he's not getting tackled, I don't know, or maybe he's getting
Mhm.
more downfield targets. So yeah, Stefan Diggs is somebody who I'm a little wary of, especially with Devonta
Mhm.
Smith right there, and Devonta Smith
Yeah.
just kind of being so juicy. I can't
Mhm.
go Stephon Diggs. So that's kind of
Yeah.
where I shy away. But I love all the guys except for Diggs.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I think we're aligned as far as how we're viewing like Stephon Diggs. Like, I just don't like where he's going, like from an average draft position. And you got Nico Collins there, you got Tank Dell, just a lot of targets in the passing game. One guy that I do like whenever he kind of falls like a round or two is like Jalen Waddle. I know everyone's like, well, Tyreek
Yeah.
Hill's there. Yes, he is. But
Yeah.
since Hill came to Miami like 2 seasons ago, I Like you got Waddle, and like he's averaged like 7 targets and 14.7 fantasy points per game. And so, that's a high octane offense. So it's good to have exposure to Miami. If you don't want to burn a first round pick, obviously on Tyreek Hill. But I'm with you on Diggs. I'll take Smith whenever he's there. But I just find Cooper Kupp is constantly at least a better value in the mock drafts that I'm in. But I really like Kupp and I like Waddle. But I'm with you. I'm kind of out on Diggs at his cost right now.
Yeah, and some of those offenses too, like Miami with Waddle, and then the Rams, and then also the Eagles. There's a funnel that like they keep their best players on the field most of the time. They're in either 11 or 12 personnel. They've got the 2 tight ends. Like they don't have 1,000 wide receivers on their field stretching the field all the time. They've got a base set that includes these players, and so Jalen Waddle's going to be on the field 80% of the time. And so if Tyreek Hill, God forbid, pulls a hamstring, he's a cheetah. I mean, he's flying all the time. Anything happens to him too, all of a sudden he is a wide receiver 1 in this league. So
agreed.
And I don't think you draft anybody to anticipate injury, but I think you said earlier about like the running back kind of insurance is same thing. I mean, he's the best wide receiver insurance in football. So I like that call too. All right, moving down a tier, still valuable, a little older, a little longer in the tooth, right? We talked a little bit about DeAndre Hopkins too, but in the next tier, you've got Keenan Allen, Chris Godwin, and then DeAndre Hopkins, wide receiver 32, 36, and 39. And excuse the pounding. I think Winter and my daughter are running around upstairs on the floor. So I'll turn myself down and kind of let you talk.
No, you're good. You're good, my man. I would say out of this tier, like I'm really looking at like your Chris Godwin. I know we talked about Hopkins, how he kind of fits into the grand scheme of things with building a fantasy team, but I look at Godwin. I know he finished just inside the top 30. I think wide receiver 28, I believe. And he did clear 1,000 yards for I think 3 consecutive seasons. You got Baker Mayfield. He had a solid year with Tampa Bay. I know he was someone that I touted as a kind of like a super flex, kind of QB2 or QB3. So happy to see him have the season that he did. And Godwin really excelled. He was lacking in the touchdown department. Obviously, you got Mike Evans is there, who's going to command a high number of targets, especially in the red zone too, just given kind of his physical frame. But you look at Godwin, I'm like, he's 28 years old, and I think he's still got some life in the legs, right? And I think he'll just have to improve on, I think, the 12.3 fantasy points per game that he averaged last year if he's going to be more than a wide receiver 3 again this year. But I do see some positive regression in that touchdown department. But just given where Godwin's going, I think he's probably, I would say, the guy, if I were choosing between Allen, Godwin, and Hopkins, I'm going with Godwin.
Yeah, I like that call too, because he had a 23% target share last year. So it's not like he was dipping into the 19 range or even 20. I mean, Evans was 24, he's 23. So that's simpatico. And the touchdown regression is a real thing too. And I also was watching a podcast, and I'm gonna have to give the guy credit later because I don't remember his name, but he was talking about how the Vegas lines, he just kind of took the Vegas lines and then turned them into fantasy stats. And Chris Godwin's way undervalued in the fact that we just kind of go, oh yeah. But Vegas, they think he's still going to, go over 1,000 yards, do these things that he's done, and so, I'm with you on that one. All right. We're moving right along. Tier number 3, we're getting a little poorer, right? Not as rich, but these are people that kind of still can win you weeks, win you leagues. In Vegas, we've got Jacoby Myers, finally caught a touchdown last year. I think maybe half a touchdown. I don't know. All right. Congrats to him. And then you've got New Orleans. I spoke of him earlier. Raheem Shaheed. I mean, he's just one of our favorite people ever. And then old man in the tooth here, Brandon Cooks in Dallas. These guys are wide receiver 54, 56, and 58 respectively. Who are you leaning to kind of in that range if you've been drafting, or are you avoiding all 3, or kind of what's your take on this bracket here?
Yeah, definitely not avoiding all 3, but you got to go with Shaheed here. I'm like, you got someone who's a very intriguing breakout candidate. He's entering his 3rd NFL season, but I'm like, he's primarily operated, I would say, as a situational guy, like during his first 2 seasons. I'm like, you look back at last year, I'm like, he had a very high ADOT, like 14.4, ADOT or average depth of target, 6th highest, at the position. Which led to a lot of big plays. He had 5 touchdowns, yards per reception was a little bit over 15 yards, 15.6 to be exact. Kind of have to look at that. But the production was, I guess, inconsistent. So you got Michael Thomas, he's gone. So you got Shaheed's top competition for targets and top competition for the number 2 receiver role. And we're talking about wide receiver 2 theory. Behind Olave, of course, is what Cedric Wilson, You got 5th-round rookie Bub Means and A.T. Perry. I'm like,
Yeah.
I think it's a strong chance that he beats those guys, and he does have a clear path to heavy usage, which in the later rounds, like that's exactly the kind of guy you want to target. So don't be surprised if I talk about Shaheed as someone to target in the double-digit rounds in that column that'll come out in early August. So
I'll read it. I'll read it for sure.
Mhm.
I agree with you on that. I think there's been a buzz, at least in the fantasy world, where we're in a little bit about, Shaheed for a while. I know Bo McBrayer likes to talk about him all the time, and I think Cooter she prays to Shaheed every night. Reads her kids bedtime stories about Shaheed. So
She's a Saints fan,
yeah,
right?
she's a
Yeah,
Saints fan.
got to
So
do it. I'm a Saints fan too. So
yeah, I love it. And so I think all of these players have upside that's baked into their ADP, and they're probably finished a little higher. But yeah, I mean, Shaheed is just a guy. I really like that a lot. Okay. Those are our tiers. We're going to switch real quick because we're at 30 minutes. I was hoping to wrap up, but we've got maybe 10 minutes left.
Yeah.
I want to talk about 3 of the most I guess important offenses in the NFL, prolific, have some of the best players and have some of the most uncertainty at wide receiver. And so we're going to talk about the Green Bay Packers. We're going to talk about the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills, all kind of unknown right now. And all of their wide receivers are kind of being drafted. And for all the ADP, what I use is I use the 4for4 ADP because they kind of aggregate the data and then look at, where everyone, they kind of take everyone's data and put it together. So all the stuff I've been sharing about wide receiver ADP comes from 4for4. So I didn't want to make it up on my own, but kind of looking at the data, let's start with Green Bay. You got an injured Watson coming back, Christian Watson coming back, who's the wide receiver 2 being drafted right now, whereas he was the wide receiver 1 last year. You've got Jaden Reed being drafted as the wide receiver 1, and then you've got Romeo Doubs, and then there's Wick, who everyone's like, this is actually the guy. So how are you looking at the Packers? And it's a uncertainty because they're all bunched together in draft. There's 2 together, and then a little bit further 2 together again. So you just know we don't know.
Yeah, for me, it's Christian Watson. I'm very concerned, we'll say, about Jaden Reed's ADP right now. But Watson's a guy I'm targeting. He's averaged 15 yards per reception over his first 2 seasons. Only 13 receivers with at least 100 targets over that time frame have a higher yards per reception average. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. We know how productive Watson has been when he's been on the field, especially in the red zone, right, with those red zone
Right.
targets. So I'll close on this. Let's talk about the elephant in the room when it comes to Watson, his hamstrings. So
Right.
Rob Demoski, ESPN's NFL Nation reporter for Green Bay, the Packers, wrote an article back in late May which discussed how Watson is solving the issue. So I just want to make a long story short. I know we're kind of within time constraints, but basically Watson, cornerback Eric Stokes, he spent time in the offseason at the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health. So here's what they discovered. They ran a lot of tests. They discovered that Watson had a 20% difference in muscle strength between his right and left legs, right? So the Packers, they kind of used that to build like a workout plan for Watson to address this during the offseason. At least as when Demoski wrote that article, it was now between like 8% and 10%. And so just think about with Watson, if the hamstrings aren't an issue, if we get, I'll say 16 games of
Right.
Watson where he's playing, just think about the upside that he has in a high octane Packers offense. So I love Watson is my wide receiver 4 or 5, just depending on how the draft's going and the size of your league. So
Yeah, I mean, he's in the 10th round for 10-man league, and he's at the end of the 8th. I mean, what a value. If you get Christian Watson at the end of the 8th round, and then he ends up being, because he's wide receiver 43 around, he ends up being the wide receiver 25 or just 30. You've gotten 12 spots. You've gotten maybe 4 points more per game or 3 points more per game than you thought you'd get out of that role. So yeah, no, I love it. All right, next one is the Kansas City Chiefs, and we got Rishi Racem Rice. I just running around, just thinks he's speed racer, running away too. Him and Hollywood Brown are on 4for4 ADP. They're stacked up wide receiver 36, wide receiver 37. And then a little bit later, Xavier Worthy.
Love it.
I'm old. Sorry, folks. My brain's been imprinted with James Worthy for a long time. Xavier Worthy is 44. So like right within a couple of tiers there, you've got all 3 of the main weapons for Patrick Mahomes, not counting Kelsey. So how are you approaching this kind of dilemma?
Yeah, for me, it's like I know people really get enamored by rookies and the potentials and all that kind of stuff, but it does take time for them to get acclimated to the NFL game. So I'm really leaning more towards Hollywood, Marquise Brown, whatever you want to call him. I
Right.
would say he's the most accomplished deep threat receiver the Chiefs have signed since Tyreek Hill departed. Now,
Yeah.
let's talk about Brown. We know what people are thinking. It never really clicked with Cliff Kingsbury's scheme back in 2022. Then we had like the foot injury, right? Poor quarterback play in 2023. But still, I keep going back to with Brown, where this is a guy that had 7 touchdowns or 40 yards or more
Mm.
during his 3 seasons in Baltimore. That was the 3rd best in the league. So I think he's well positioned for a bounce back season. He's catching passes from arguably the best quarterback in the game right now, Patrick Mahomes, and he could be boom or bust. Obviously, with Xavier Worthy on the roster, but again, I'd rather roster the veteran who has shown us that he can do things at the next level rather than the rookie who may need some time in the slow cooker to marinate. So I'm looking at Brown. He's definitely a high end flex option. That's kind of where I'm drafting him. But I do believe he possesses wide receiver 2 upside as well, especially if things click sooner rather than later, right?
Yeah, I like that call too. And just thinking about, I saw Matt Harmon did a little reception perception on Rishi Rice, and he said he didn't have a route tree. He said he had a route shrub. And it was
Yeah.
more of just the lower routes. And so Hollywood is going to be more that downfield threat. And besides, the difference between him and Marquise Valdez-Scantling is that he can catch the football. Which is important for a wide receiver. So, when he gets downfield, I think Hollywood will be able to get those long plays. So I think they'll be boom and bust, but I think the busts will not be as important because the booms will be big. If you got Patrick Mahomes throwing,
Absolutely
30 touchdowns, 35
Mhm.
touchdowns. So I like that. All right. All right. Next is the Buffalo Bills. So, right now the Buffalo Bills too are kind of an enigma. You've got 3 people who are being all drafted around the same area in, my guy, Curtis Samuel, long journeyed from the Commanders here near where I live, Khalil Shakir. And then you've got the rookie. I'm trying to scroll down how see far away he is. He's not too far away from them as well.
Keon Coleman.
Keon Coleman. So they're all around that same. It's late. They're in like the wide receiver, I don't know, 56, 53. So you're getting him in the 11th round. So nobody except Dalton Kincaid is commanding a lot of respect, and James Cook are commanding a lot of respect from the drafters at all. So it's like we're drafting the quarterback as the highest possible tier. He's number 1. And then we've got Kincaid. He's up here. And then Cook's pretty up here. And then just floor until you get down to the wide receivers. So I know none of them are going to finish, wide receiver, 12 or 15 or 25 even. But out of these people, Curtis Samuel, Shakir, are you targeting any of these guys? Do you like it? Do you kind of see upside in their performances from last year or, last couple years in Carolina where Samuel had experience and people seem to keep leaning on that a lot with Joe Brady? Well, what do you think?
Yeah, I keep, I would say, gravitating more towards like Curtis Samuel. I kind of look at it this way. I guess this is the easiest way to break it down. Like if you're looking for someone, like if you're in a deeper league where you may need to insert like a starter and you're looking kind of for floor, I do like Samuel. I just think Coleman's going to be more of like not a project, but just someone for where you just need to commit to holding him for the entire season, just to see whenever the explosion happens. But let's talk about Samuel briefly. Had a great stint with the Commanders over the last 2 seasons, really showing his versatility. You just think about in 33 regular season games, and like Samuel caught 126 of 183 targets, for 1,269 receiving yards, had those 8 touchdowns, effective as a rusher and also as a receiver. Now you just think about the circumstances. He's with Josh Allen in the Bills offense that ranked 5th in total yards per game and 6th in points scored per game. So it really positions him for success. And he's got a clear path to targets. You got Stephon Diggs, who's in Houston. You got Gabe Davis, that's in Jacksonville now. So the targets have to go somewhere. I do think that Allen's going to spread the kind of the pie around, but let's just be real. I'm like, you've got Samuel, who has a chance to get at least 90 or more targets, even playing alongside a healthy Keon Coleman.
Yep.
But I just kind of look at it as whoever gets the hot hand, Josh Allen will probably feed them even more. So I think 90 targets is about the floor, but it would not surprise me at all if once the dust settles on the season, that you got Curtis Samuel, who's the top, I would say, Bills fantasy wide receiver, and ends up getting like 120 or so targets. And he's someone that we're talking about, man, I should have added more shares of Samuel in drafts this year. So
yeah, and I think that I love everybody on their team, but Shakir's been getting that buzz Just from his role last year at the end of the season. People saw him in the playoffs. They was just like, dude, this is the guy now. I mean, look what he's doing. He's quick. He can, take a hit. He can go whatever. But so I think Curtis Samuel is being kind of overlooked as well. So, all right. I love all those takes. They're all super informative. If you're not following him, Eric and Moody over there on the X. Now we're going to get into the meat and potatoes. I'm asking him for his guys. These are his guys. You stuck around. Thank you. All 52 of you on the Twitters. You're good people. Right now, I want to know who is the number one wide receiver in all drafts that you've looked at yourself, the 40, the 30, whatever. You're like, I'm getting this guy. I love him. I love his upside. I love where he is, being drafted. I'm getting him.
So you're kind of talking about the favorite wide receiver one, right? That's kind of where we're going with this. Anybody? Okay.
Yeah, your favorite guy this is the guy that you're getting the most because you think he's the best wide receiver that's out there.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of looking at it as I'll kind of set the stage briefly. I would say the wide receiver that I'm finding early in drafts is a really great value that I feel like is getting disrespected is Davante Adams. So it just blows my mind where he's going in some of our ESPN drafts. And I'm finding if I'm going running back early, that I'm able to get Adams in the late second, sometimes third round. And you just got to look at the circumstances. Context is important, right? He had 3 quarterbacks that was throwing the football last year, mid-season coaching change. His 2023 season was probably better than many remember. He finished 10th among wide receivers in fantasy points, had the hot start, 2 20-point performances in the first 3 weeks, had the middle part of the year, we're talking about why is Davante Adams not getting the targets? The mid-year dip in targets. He had Josh McDaniels. He's gone. But I'll close on this. He had Antonio Pierce, right? Interim head coach. Now their head coach of the future. Adams finished strong. He posted the league's highest target share, which is 36.4%. Had 5 games of 14 or more fantasy points. The targets will be there for Adams. He can produce. I don't care who's throwing him the football. I just love him at his ADP right now. So I'm very comfortable having him as my wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2, depending on how I'm building my team. So
175 targets. That's like the most. Him and CeeDee Lamb are up there in the number. Like, what are you doing, folks? It's such a value.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, I'm really surprised, especially considering in some of these ESPN leagues, with the staff and colleagues, I'm just like, wow, why is Adams still available here? So I feel like it's like a fight to get Adams between me and Field Yates and many of these drafts.
The smart guys. Yeah, the guys I like. Yeah, it is interesting too because he has the most touchdown pass receptions in the last 7 years by far over anybody. And so I know that last year's a little bit dip, but I think I project him for 9. You know what I mean? It's come on, guys. It's Davante Adams. Yeah, 31% target.
Gotta get him.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, last one. You teased about this a little bit. You like to get into those late round guys. We've mentioned some late round guys, but somebody who's maybe not somebody who's the wide receiver 2 on their team, just somebody who's anybody. Who's somebody that you find yourself looking at as somebody who you think can ascend during the season, or who just has such like you said, blatant disrespect, but maybe in the later rounds that you're trying to snag?
Yeah, I keep going back to Demario Douglas because it's we talked about it at length, but I just look at his average draft position and the situation in New England because it's like no one really knows who's going to be the number 1 guy. Even if you look at Mike Clay's projections, Bourne and Douglas have a similar projection number. And then I'm assuming if you look at projections for other websites in the industry, it's a very hazy situation. But I just look at Douglas with what he did last year and what he can do this year and the cost that you would have to pay to get him, which is essentially nothing.
Free.
Yeah. I'm like, it's no reason why you should not leave your draft without Douglas on your team, really just to see what happens. I'd rather have him. He's the wide receiver of the future rather than someone like Kendrick Bourne, or others that they have on the team. So.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I love that pick. And looking at just, the target share, the volume, they don't know what's going to happen, but what Demario Douglas can do. That's what you do know, right? Hunter Henry and Demario Douglas, I don't feel uncomfortable drafting them at their ADP. And when I get to them, they fall to me. I'm very excited. So, well, this has been great. I got to tell you, Eric, I love your fantasy content. I love all the stuff you do. I love your videos. I love your nostalgia as well, my friend. We look young. We're not as young as people think. We're not in our 20s like Luke Sawhook, right? And definitely not 18 like our boy Hutch. Holy moly, he's 18. So God bless the young people. We're a little bit older. tell people what you're doing and where they can find you this year, and kind of what you're excited about next.
Yeah, and I'll kind of touch on a lot of things briefly, but I'll kind of want to kind of book in for what we were talking about at the beginning of the show. Like you mentioned, with some of the younger analysts out there, like with Hutch and
Love
with
those
Luke
guys,
and the
man.
others that are out there,
Yeah.
great guys. But look at it this way: is that a lot of people, it's a high percentage of people. I forgot the exact age. I kind of did a thread about this a while back. For basically, if you're middle age, so we'll just say late 30s, 40s, a lot of people have a career change at that time. So if you have aspirations to be a content creator, in sports, whether it's
Mm.
fantasy or betting, I'm like, a lot of people make the move at that time. So don't let age deter you. So I will, just like you said, Scott, I will encourage everybody that's watching or listening just to go follow me on X at Eric N. Moody.
Mm.
If you like the NFL, NBA, and WNBA from a fantasy and sports betting perspective, I'm your guy. And if you also like, nostalgia tweets, whether it's music, or movies like from the 80s and 90s, I'm your Huckleberry. I'm your
Mhm.
guy. So
Oh
you
yeah,
want to follow me for that. So I would say, to close the loop on that, the things that I'm really looking forward to for, I guess, for this year, I'm just really looking forward for the NFL season to start.
for sure.
I know there'll be more, fantasy focus episodes. We've got the fantasy football marathon that's coming up. That's always a fun show to do. You've got 4 straight hours on Sunday of fantasy football talk. You hear from me, Liz Loza, Mike Clay, Stefania, everybody on the ESPN team, where we're kind of get you prepared for your drafts. And then we're going to have a mock draft on a Tuesday night, where it'll be like a 10-team league. It may be 12. We'll see. We've always done 10. Where we're going to be able to go through an actual draft. You're going to be able to hear from everyone. So I'm really looking forward to that. One of my favorite things to do every year, but also just helping people with waiver wire pickups this year, and the NFL Nation fantasy fallout column. But of course, just helping people on X. So if you have a question, about fantasy football, send me the question. It's a high probability that I will respond. And so I look forward to interacting with you. That's all I got.
I'm gonna testify to that. I love it. Whenever I see Eric, we're busy people, but whenever I see him in the Twitter streets, the X streets, I love going back and forth with you. And you make fantasy football better, more accessible, more understandable for friends.
Yeah.
And I love that you are your dream kept you alive and going and moving and doing that. And it's a very inspirational thing. And as somebody who, I'm not going to be a teacher forever. I've got to retire soon enough. I definitely am going to move in, hopefully, into that space too, because I love football and I love everything that we do around it, talking about it, and most importantly, building relationships. So thank you so much again, Eric. You're awesome. Go follow him. He will be your Twitter Sherpa for fantasy football. I guarantee it.
I love it.
Also follow me too, because I'm pretty good. I'm not bad.
He is good. He is good.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm going for a 4-peat this year in one of my leagues that has Joe Bond and Denny Carter and JL, a bunch of guys in we call it a local Maryland league here, and I've been talking some mad shit to those guys because they haven't stopped me in 3 years, and Denny's lost twice in a row, and last year he was up 80 points because CeeDee Lamb had 80 points at the end. And victory lapping on Twitter, and I picked up Darius Slayton off the waiver wire, and he caught a touchdown to beat him. And so I gotta get my saw sharpened too, and come back strong. So I'll be following you. I'll be listening. I'll be taking in your content. I appreciate you, brother. And everybody go give them a follow. Thank you guys. We'll see you guys next time. We'll be having more friends up soon. Mystery. I won't tell you who they're coming, until they're here. So all right, have a good one. Peace.